What's going on, creators? Yeah, I just want to get on here and bring everybody back to now. Appreciate y'all being here and vibing with me for a bit. Yeah, today I'd like to talk a little bit about taking your power back and how you can start to do that so you're not getting swept away in all of these narratives and propaganda and fear-driven hysterical things from the world. And start moving throughout your day with a sense of joy, empowerment, not feeling like a victim anymore, but feeling like a boss, is maybe one way to think about it. I see a lot of people in like the truth community, which is where I spent a lot of time in that rabbit hole. So it's like I really resonate with that crowd of people. But it seems like what happens is like this constant reactivity to the screen, to the narratives, to the programming, to the propaganda, and really you can disregard 99% of that shit. It's not really serving to constantly, unless you're just interested in like the football, the sport aspect of like politics, and if you're not getting like victim mentality about it, getting drawn into a lot of like weird doubling down on well, this is the issue I'm fucking standing on type thing. It's like it's one thing to kind of watch it just as like a sporting thing, as like, oh, I'm rooting for this team, I'm rooting for that team, I like that person, I like where they're coming from, that kind of whatever is, nothing wrong with that. It's when it becomes like, they are oppressing me, they're taking away my freedoms, did you see what Biden just did to your freedom now, buddy? It's like, first off, freedom comes from your relationship with God, and man writing a paragraph on paper doesn't do anything. That's part of this weird kind of groupthink, mass formation is way to maybe look at it, where it's just like you are limiting yourself based on your own programming. It's the same kind of thing. It's like if I'm going to put this person on a pedestal and make them a king to rule over me and my state of consciousness, well, you can start to see the dynamic, and it's the same thing with like the truther crowd, where it's just like, well, where like the masses might fall victim to like, oh, well, inflation's just transitory, Mike. Where like the truther take on it would be, well, it's just a Ponzi scheme, Mike. They just create the money out of nothing. But both camps, if you want to label them like that, are both being reacted to the screen instead of going within and deciding what that situation means in relationship to who you are in Christ. That's kind of the difference. It's like, oh yeah, there's the Matrix world where it's kind of governing people that want the king to rule over them, that want to have a master that enslaves them. Some people want that, it seems like. I don't want that, but I'm not going to. There's many years I spent trying to shake people. Wake up, wake up, snap out of it. You're not even really. You're just parroting things. You're just being swept away by these extremes and everything. I've kind of lost the drive to want to do that, mainly because of one of the things I've come to understand is when it comes to creation, being able to just observe something and just go, well, that's just what it is a very important skill to start to put on, because a lot of reactivity and like mental narratives has to do with resisting the way things are, to kind of like superimpose, well, if my will was on this situation, this is how I would have done it. And that causes so much just drama and just like wishing things were different. And it's just like, okay, sometimes things are just fucking bullshit. That's just what it is. It's like, well, Mike, if God's in control of everything, and it's like, okay, from my life experience, everything is corresponding to like states of consciousness. If you've been into metaphysics for a while, you're starting to understand this kind of law of consciousness, where it's like the inner being is externalized outside of you constantly, like a big mirror. And so like your life in general is already a demonstration of, one, your faith, to your identity, and it's really a combination of those two things. It's like this fundamental assumption about reality, your relationship with God, and the mix of that. And so to start taking a step out of like the matrix programming and like the hysteria, I was like, well, did you know that the entire English language is just spellcraft to get you to impose your blah blah blah? And it's like, again, the dots are connecting. Yeah, it's like, yeah, that has a relationship to things, but when you realize that it's corresponding to what you believe that's a negative, that's a downward trajectory or whatever, that causes suffering, it causes fear or hysteria. Well, then to you, that's your take. That's how you're experiencing. That's what's being reflected back to you. And you see that with both sides of politics. Both sides are, in my opinion at least, there's unconscious like things that are going on with both of them. They're both neutral in my opinion, and as regards to their policy decisions, and this march of authoritarianism. But a lot of that has to do with people not owning their own bullshit, putting people on pedestals, and then you can watch the kings and like the archetypal. It's not right. Archetype. What am I trying to say? Archetypal. I don't know. It's like these like general like personas. It's like watching these personas on the outside, which are actually a direct reflection of like drama going on within you. So it's like every time you forgive somebody outside of yourself for like, oh, drifting into like a fucked up state of consciousness and being maybe draining, or most of it's just they're becoming fearful about something and lashing out, and trying to keep themselves safe from whatever danger that they're experiencing. It could just be like, oh, you reminded them of some like, oh, the way you excluded me from the group reminded me how my dad and my brother excluded me from a fishing trip that was really something I was looking forward to, and now like I'm triggered by it again, and now I'm like lashing out, because I haven't dealt with that kind of emotion, I haven't healed from it, and it's still just there. So you got a lot of that kind of shit going on with people. A lot of people are just living in their own kind of feedback loops, and that's like another part of like taking your power back, is realizing the powers within you. As you start to realize this correspondence between your state of being and what you're demonstrating in your life, because it's all coming to you unconsciously or consciously. And the problem with the unconscious shit coming back to you is a lot of time it's what you don't want, and it's like your fears come upon you unconsciously because that's what you're dwelling on in your consciousness, believing in separation, believing that there's a they that's doing it to you, that's enslaving you. You're actually building the they up and enslaving yourself to this idea, which then it only affects you. It's like the person that maybe you put on a pedestal. As somebody who's now kind of been in music for a long time, has been kind of has a biz, it's like I'm around a lot of fucking people. It's like I talk to a lot of people. I'm around a lot of people. Not super like close, but like I associate with a lot of people. I talk to a lot of people every fucking day and every all the time. It's like people reaching out, whatever. And I've realized that the shit I'm saying can be received 1,000 different ways from the way I intended it to be expressed. People are hearing shit that it's like I've had it really become a lot more, I don't want to say repetitive, but it's like when people are working for me, for example, I constantly have to just, do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Is that clear? Do you understand? Do you understand? Because without that kind of just that double thing, you could say, hey, move this piece of paper and put it over on that temporary desk in my room, and someone might take the paper and take it to a desk outside the room, and then you're like, where did I lose you here? At what point did that become unclear? So it's like just trying to be understood better, to try to do communication a little bit better, but realizing that the power to communicate better is also within you. So it's like everything in your life is a demonstration of where you're already at in consciousness. So it's like wanting to constantly have this like imaginary future utopia, you made it moment, whatever, where you're like, well, all my problems will be gone, and people will just love me for who I am, and yeah, things, everything will be cozy and rosy and whatever. Um, until you start bringing that into the present moment state of being where you're at now, by realizing that you're already demonstrating what's going on in your consciousness, and to improve your life situations, you have to start letting go of a lot of the disempowering mental narratives of, oh, Biden, and or to make this more timeless, oh, the president just signed some legislation that all of a sudden makes me feel like a slave, or it takes away my inherent God-given freedom. And it's like, most of the people in politics are, it seems like, as an observer, a lot of them are just focused either on themselves and trying to keep their job as a, someone that has a six-figure a year job or whatever. It's like, even locally I see it where people are just too much of a coward to fucking make a stand on anything, to try to do anything different. I mean, they try to do windmills around here to do like generate electricity, and what a fucking gigantic shit show that was. And it's like, well, the high frequencies of the motors running or whatever can be offensive to cattle. It's like, what? It's like, oh, don't you know, Mike, that the windmill will throw sheets of ice the size of a fucking car, and it could just land on your house? It's like the next state over, like Ohio, because my wife's family lives in Ohio, so we'd like drive there to go visit them and whatnot. There's like windmills everywhere, and it's just like not a big deal. Who cares, type of thing. I find them kind of like fascinating and interesting, I guess, on some level. Just the scope of how large those windmill farms are and how big they are. And it's like, it's impressive. I think it's neat. And so it's like, when it comes to like Indiana or whatever, oh, we're gonna put them here, and it's like, no fucking way. Indiana was like one of the last states to even adopt daylight savings time, so it's like, kind of the culture of this state is real. I was surprised the COVID shit went as far as it did, as far as like people's willingness to obey authority, in the sense that normally it's not like that. Like, our mayor of this city has maybe 10, 12,000 people in it. Probably like most middle-sized cities anywhere, or towns, or whatever you classify that as. The mayor never even said anything about COVID, which I respect him for that. Like the old mayor, he was like in like, I don't know, 30 years. I mean, he is like a long time as the mayor. And I like, as like, somebody in town, I'm really active in my community with the handyman business. And it's like, I go to a lot of people's houses. I talk to a lot of people in different positions all over the spectrum, But, like, one of them, I do work probably a couple times a year at his house. He's a politician and stuff, and you just get to know him on a personal level. And I go in their house, they see scripture on the wall and shit, and like, you talk to him like a human being, and it's like, oh, you actually sound like a human being, not some just Illuminati puppet or whatever. And it's like, the mayor, stepped down because he was getting old. This new guy got in. Did say one thing. He still hasn't said anything about it. They went business as usual. They're renovating the downtown, and trying to bring more culture to town and stuff like that, which I like that. And so they never got caught up in the fear and hysteria. Never imposed any type of like weird shit. Not like, I don't think anybody in this town would even went for it, because most of this community is based on like the religion. That's who's in power, like, around here. And in reality, it's like the churches, part of the Bible Belt or whatever. And so it's like, talking to a lot of like business owners where I live, a lot of them are like involved in the church. I'm involved in the church. I play guitar at the church. And there's all different churches and stuff. But it's like a common factor in a lot of like businesses locally, is God and spiritual things and community and stuff like that. And so, getting back off that tangent, it's like, you can see, like, okay, well, locally there's none of these like mental narratives. Very, very little. Little of that drama. But then when it comes to like, oh, let's put more people on these pedestals. Well, to start taking your power back, you start to realize that there is not that pedestal. It's like, there isn't a group of like adults that got it figured out and are just doing shit. You know, it's like that's the scary part for a lot of people. It's like when you realize the captain of the ship just decided just to go that direction, just because, like there's no real reason other than seemed like a right thing to do. I'm just gonna go in that direction. And that's something I've had, like actually struggled with having a business and having employees and stuff. You know, we're like I don't really think in terms of like a long-term plan. It's just like whatever's happening in the here and now, I'm going to be successful at accomplishing that task. You know, so it's like, okay, right now, painting a house. I don't give a shit what's going on 2 weeks from now. It's like, I'm going to paint that house like a fucking masterpiece when it's done. It's going to look fucking awesome. And every time I'm going to drive by it, you know, it's like going to have a good energy. That's the only thing I really care about. You know, it's like putting out an energy that feels heavenly on some level, that feels good, it feels peaceful, looks good. Because I feel like how you do one thing is how you do everything. And so it's like, you know, if you've like dedicated like a lot of time to like martial arts, an instrument, any of these like kind of hobbies or whatever, that you become an expert in it and then become professional in it and be like whatever. You know, I feel like just that drive, even like bodybuilding, weightlifting, fitness, that kind of shit, is like how you do one thing's how you do everything. And so it's like, okay, well, and part of the reason for saying that, again, because it's a demonstration of your consciousness. So it's like, if you are in this victim mentality and you're putting people on pedestals that they're better than you or they're smarter, they know what's best for you, and you're trusting in people instead of trusting, you know, and there's a dual thing with that, you know, because it's easy to get hung up if you're interpreting it from like the egoic kind of like, oh, everybody's separate, everything's separate, versus I'm going to trust people in general, versus, because my part of my background, zero trust in people, you know, at all. It's just like, that was like put into me at a young age as part of my programming. Is like my dad was just like, don't fucking trust anybody. And that served me well, you know, because but again, those beliefs become like the world you walk into. And so that was shown to me over and over again why you shouldn't trust people. But you know, God works through people. So it's like I have a surgery coming up, which is like fucking almost 18 days away, 19 days away from now getting my hip replaced, which has been a whole fucking process in itself, where it's just like I wasn't going to do it. I was just like kind of just going to do I've already kind of like gotten used to what is on some level, but like with my dad dying, he was really like encouraging me to get it fixed or whatever. And so once he died, it's like, okay, well, that's kind of on the radar, I guess, again. And I was like open to either being healed miraculously, quantum like healing, any type of way. I didn't really care, you know. And it's just like I'm going to walk in the assumption that I'm already healed, I'm already, you know, perfectly, you know, fine. You know, it's like there's nothing wrong with me. And like every bit of like programming that comes up, it's like, no, you've been dealing with this for 20 years. That's not true. You know, all that resistance and shit. You know, it becomes externalized, you know, in a form that my subconscious, I guess, can handle. You know, where it was like, okay, well, a lady at church that became friends with my wife, well, it turns out her husband's an orthopedic surgeon, you know, that we found out like last Thanksgiving or something like that. Or I can't remember. It was like Thanksgiving meal. I don't think it was Thanksgiving because my dad was still alive at Thanksgiving. You know, so it was like around that same time, though, you know, where it was like, okay, well, you know, he's an orthopedic surgeon, like in a group that my insurance, it all fucking came together like synchronistically, and it's just like I can't deny, you know. My wife, she's like, see, you know, that's God's plan. He's, you know, he's an orthopedic surgeon. We go to church with him. You were saying how you don't trust doctors, and you know, don't trust like that, you know, with the COVID shit. You know, it's like, you know, it's like, how am I supposed to trust a fucking doctor that you have to wear a face mask going there? It's like the same thing with like going to a counselor. It's like, how can I trust a counselor when they're demonstrating insanity? You know, and it's the same. It was the same thing. But then it was like, okay, well, it just came together through a spiritual thing, which then led to where we're at now. And so it all came together through this bridge of incidents. I'm still open to the possibility that could, you know, miraculously be healed right now. You know, it's like, But if that's something I have to endure and go through, fuck it. Why? As part of the plan, I guess. But part of like taking the power back, is in trusting that God's pulling the strings, that it's being done to you by this correspondence through this law of consciousness, this cause and effect type thing. And instead of like having undesirable things constantly being done unto you because being unconscious, constantly in a mind of fear and hysteria, instead of looking at things through everything's connected through God, everything's through this spiritual correspondence, everything is being reflective, and it's like knowing that whatever somebody else is doing, you can be doing that as well, because God gave that to them. God will give it to you. God's not a respecter of persons, like, oh, that person's on a pedestal and you're not. But it's all about your mindset. And so losing the victim mentality mindset and adopting a more empowering mindset is really important, because you are at the root of what's going on in your life with your thinking, with your beliefs and your assumptions. And if your beliefs and assumptions are limiting, disempowering, if you're, oh, well, Mike, I'm awake because I can see the scam, and I can tell you 20 different ways that that's a scam, and it's like, you're still, who gives a fuck about what's going on through some media? It's like, you could start a newspaper, you could say whatever you want. Does that make that then on a pedestal? And it's like, so stop putting these sources on pedestals of like, oh, that's the gospel message coming through MSNBC and CNN and Fox News and all these like kind of broadcasters. It's like, that's their take. Doesn't it's helpful maybe to start looking at it like that's a perspective, but that's not the only perspective. That can't be the I was going to draw a new image. I guess I could do that now, because it kind of is reflective to the way everything kind of is in this creation on some level. Let me make this thick so you guys can see it good. And if you're driving or something, it doesn't really matter. It's just like kind of a bell curve or whatever. But it's like everything kind of boils down. This is not the greatest drawing here, but on one end of this curve and the other end, it's like you have this split, and you got a lot of people that are on either side of this split, so it's like you label this the fear side, and this is the pendulum, and then you get this be like maybe the love side, and on either side of this is a way you can look at something, so you got majority of people somewhere just in this middle area, then you got the two extremes, and you could look at this as like one of the bigger binary situations of like spiritual binary, where you have like the Antichrist. It boils down to states of consciousness, and each state of consciousness on this thing has a different correspondence. They all have different correspondence, and that, as you kind of go on these different takes, you can look at it many different ways. On the highest end of the love spectrum, you can look at it through the mind of Christ, or you can look at it through the mind of Antichrist. That kind of binary. Everybody else is somewhere in between that spectrum on anything. So it's like, you can look at this as scarcity and abundance. Same kind of thing, any of this binary situation, you got either side of that thing with many different states of consciousness in between, all having a correspondence in perception and in the circumstances and everything going on in life. Well, if you're constantly putting your attention over on this side of the the bell curve, I guess, and spending, your attention maybe on this one, look at all of these like little notches as, oh, well, maybe this is NBC, maybe this is Fox News, maybe this is whatever. It doesn't matter. It's all relative. So it's like, oh, well, maybe Mike is over here on this side, and that person's over here on that side. It's not to start to judge and condemn other people, but it's just to look at what is and just go, this is what's going on, And so, the more that you focus your attention from the fear side of the fence, and you have that bell curve at the top, where you got average, whatever, you have the kind of mainstream or whatever. Then you could look at this as the left to right in politics. That would be another way. And if you're on the left, the right would be on this fear side. If you're on the right, the left would be on the fear side. But both of them are mirrored of each other depending on your state of mind. And so that's probably the next stream, really go into a detail about how you can use this to start to refocus your attention and to take your power back. So on this side you have slave thinking, that's another way to think of it, versus free. And this actually, instead of going up and down, left and right like linear time, it actually goes up and down, up and down this spectrum. But for just observable reality, a lot of people follow this kind of curve, where it's just like, maybe somebody over here on the very far side has a corresponding person over here that will talk shit. So it's like, for like an Alex Jones over here, and not to say that, he's on the love free side, but, he does, demonstrate a lot of, faith towards Jesus and God and everything, so not to talk shit about Alex Jones, but, it's just very polarizing. And so you have a figure over here on that side of the fence. Well, then that triggers people on this side over here, and the fear slave side. So you have like Jesus, or the Christ kind of state of mind. Well, that super triggers the Antichrist state of mind. And anybody over here on this side of the bell curve will fucking have a corresponding person that gets triggered over here. Instead of getting mad at that and just putting your attention on the person over here that now you're putting on a pedestal, that you're kind of tiptoeing around and walking on eggshells around, and actually kind of giving them power, start to take your power back by just realizing that this happens. That it's like, oh, that person is just afraid of what I'm saying. So it's like becoming more and more okay with whether people will love you or just fear you. Okay, either way, it all kind of works out. So it's like in taking your power back, realizing that both sides of that pendulum are giving you energy, giving you attention. If you're not becoming reactive and trying to destroy it or whatever, you can start to happen. But I wanted to introduce that concept. But I think I'm gonna bounce. I'm gonna head to my dad's, and supposedly the house is closing in I don't know, a month, I guess. I don't know. I gotta just make sure all the shit's out of there. And so been gradually just throwing things in the garbage, and it's a rainy day, and so I can't paint this house. I'm only got like a day or two left. I can't wait to get it done, just because now I'm like, I got 3 weeks before the surgery, and I'll be out of being able to physically work like that. 6 weeks, I guess, is what they're saying. Probably faster, but I don't believe time is real, so it's like that 6 weeks, it's like, okay, whatever, it's just one day at a time is how I'm looking at it. And so with that being said, I think I'm about, so thanks everybody for liking, sharing, subscribing, all the social networking things. Appreciate your spiritual support and your physical support. Thank you for that, and until the next now, God bless.